Yes, miniature painting, an artistic outlet like no other, and in my super unbiased opinion, the best hobby in the whole world. It focuses the senses, lets the creative juices flow, and most importantly, puts you in a truly relaxing state of mind. Unless you're me and you seem to just love using this hobby to conjure up feelings of intense stress and pressure for yourself. That's right, today I am doing another one of my extreme painting challenges. Yay! I don't like the fingers. Now, the last miniature I painted before my extensive con season was one of the biggest miniatures I've ever painted. He was huge and insanely detailed, and unsurprisingly, it took me weeks to paint, but it was totally worth it in the end because look at how precious and perfect he is. Oh my goodness. So I decided that in order to brush off some cobwebs and get back in the painting saddle, that when I came back, I would do essentially the opposite and try and paint something extremely tiny. But unlike my last tiny miniature video where I painted some of my favorite Warhammer chapters on some epic scale space marines, we are going even smaller and painting a miniature from perhaps an unexpected source. Gundam models, usually the fancier ones like real grades or master grades, occasionally come with pilots, which are 1/100 or 1/44 scale versions of the guys which pilot your Gundam. And recently I got my first 1/44 scale pilot with my new real grade MS-06 custom Zaku kit. And yes, the pilot is of course the original version of my favorite twink war criminal, Char Aznable. And oh boy, is he tiny. Like, I was shocked by just how small this miniature is, even by my own standards. So of course, I'm gonna paint him really, really well. Hopefully. So join me as I raise my own blood pressure in an attempt to impress the netizens of my new Gundam hobby and witness me try to pro paint the smallest miniature that I have ever seen. Whoosh. Psych this way. Like I said before, I personally love painting very small miniatures, especially Games Workshop's epic scale miniatures. They're some of my favorite minis to paint, and honestly, at this point, I don't struggle to paint them that much, which is great, but I do think that this particular Gundam pilot is going to be a little bit more of a challenge for me. So let me show you the two miniatures so we can compare them, and I'll let you know why. As you can see here, it seems like the two are around the same height, but the Games Workshop epic scale miniatures have way more depth in their sculpts and are kind of designed to be a little bit chunkier, and their recesses are a bit deeper to help the average painter not have a full aneurysm whilst painting them, which we love. Thank you so much, Games Workshop. However, the 1/144 scale Bandai pilots do not have this luxury. No. They are, for a start, very skinny little anime guys, and are for that reason spindly as hell. And while Char's outfit is fairly simple, which is cool for me painting it, his face and helmet details especially are so fine that they are actually impossible to see with the naked eye, and nearly impossible to see even under the highest form of digital magnification that I can muster. But while Char is around the same height as an epic miniature, due to his spindliness and the fineness of details he has in his sculpt, I would say that he is definitely smaller than an epic miniature, meaning that this will officially be the smallest miniature I have ever painted in my life. Also, like I said, when the details are this fine, every single layer of paint is gonna be eventually more visible than they would be on a regular scale Warhammer miniature. And if you're not careful and you build up too many layers or even make too many corrections on your miniature, it could ruin the whole paint job and the miniature itself so quickly without you even knowing it until you check the miniature under some higher magnification. So, no pressure, right? None. It's gonna be fine. The first step, as with any miniature, was actually to clean this guy up and get him prepped for priming. And Gundam kits, from my experience, truly do not have the mold line issues that Warhammer miniatures do. But again, at this scale, you're gonna be able to see everything, and there was a tiny little mold line on his leg, so I very carefully removed that and some of the little nub marks on his arm too, in an extremely they did surgery on a grape moment. Now, I hate priming miniatures at the best of times. It's my least favorite part of miniature painting because I'm always so paranoid about overspraying the mini and ruining all of the details. But this was a special type of fear. I did my usual ritual of bathing my primer in some warm water before spraying, and recently I've been using Colorforge Matte Black instead of Citadel Chaos Black, and this isn't sponsored or anything, but I really recommend this primer because look at how well it preserved all of the details even at this scale. I am super impressed by this spray and very happy because I really did think that this would maybe be the end of the video, so yay! But yes, obviously for this project I decided to bust out my minuscule custom brushes, which are, or probably more accurately were, my regular Siege Studio size 0 brushes, which as you can see have been whittled down to barely a whisker on a grasshopper, which makes them perfect for attempting some absolutely dumb scale miniature painting. And after looking at 100 reference images and procrastinating a little bit more due to the sheer weight of the task at hand, it was time to finally actually paint something. I'm sorry. I decided to start with Char's red robes, which honestly seemed like it would be the easiest part of his miniature because it kind of was. This bit didn't really give me much bother at all. The areas are nice and comparatively large, and there's a good amount of definition and edges on his coat and his knees, so that I could even sneak in a good bit of edge highlighting with basically no problem. The inside of his cape as well was also fine, I guess. It's this kind of off-green, creamy sort of color, so I managed to squeeze in some gradients here too, so yeah, I was off to a particularly cocky start. But alas, good things don't last forever, so it was time for me to try and tackle everyone's least favorite color to paint, white, but horrifically tiny. Now, to my surprise, there's actually a few different types of white on Char. He has this kind of vinyl white on his boots and gloves, a greenish silvery color on his helmet, and this almost lilac-y white grey on his gun and mask. But I'm gonna paint the mask later with the rest of his face, so I am just skipping that part for now. Anyways, because I'm using Pro Acryl Bold Titanium White to mix in all my whitish colors, and since that color is objectively the best white paint on the market, prove me wrong, I dare you, because you can't, this bit was also quite easy. Although, as you may have noticed, now we are starting to work in more and more uncomfortably small spaces, and I can start to feel the blood pressure rising in the tips of my finger and my stress levels beginning to escalate. But not yet. There's still time. I started painting Char's black cape next, and I thought that this was going quite well and it was pretty easy until I remembered I had to actually try and freehand this elaborate gold wing design on the lapel, which is obviously an absolute nightmare. Since there was absolutely no way that I was going to be able to do those like tiny little wing designs using my God-given hands, I decided to opt for plotting out a shape which looked close to the design and then kind of chip into it with my background color. Let me explain a little bit better because this is a good tip for any freehanding on a miniature. Sometimes when you're painting at this scale and you're trying to freehand something, I find it's much easier to sort of carve into the design rather than to try and freehand it perfectly. Here you can see that I placed the trim on a little bit messily, but instead of painting it over to try again until it looks right, I'm using some black paint to neaten it up into my desired shape a little bit more, which I find is often a lot more of a forgiving way to paint something precise this small. And in the end, I think it turned out really good, and it actually reads as what I wanted it to, which is wild, so I'm pretty proud of this part, I'm not gonna lie. But it was time to do the bit that I had been very much avoiding up until this moment, which is attempting to paint Char's dumb, handsome, stupidly tiny, dumb, stupid face. That was a fine take. I'm going with that one. And before I start, let me please just remind you that this is how small the miniature I'm painting is. And I am not using a magnifying glass to paint him. And yeah, at this scale, I have basically zero margin for error. So one like equals one good luck for me, I suppose. So thanks you, generous YouTube denizen you. Anyways, because this wasn't already difficult enough for me, I decided that I would try and do something a little bit untoward on the helmet face area, which could potentially mess everything up even more. So in all honesty, I don't actually love the face and helmet sculpt on this miniature. I know. I'm sorry. I think that the brim of the helmet comes down a little bit too low, and it doesn't really match the artwork that it's based on as well as I think it could. So since the details are so fine, I'm gonna actually try and fudge the sculpt a little bit by painting the eyes further up and faking a new helmet brim a little bit further up too, with some clever recess shading and highlighting using my paints. This is an extremely risky move, and it may end up looking pretty bad if you're not a super radical professional minuscule painter like I am. And trust me, even for me, this is a pretty bold move. So I don't know if I fully recommend fudging miniature sculpts like this, but fortunately for me, this time it actually went okay. I eventually got the face area actually looking not too bad, and I even managed to do the eyes, kind of. He sort of looks like he's winking a little bit, but that's okay. I kind of like that for him. He can have a little wink. But now we have to move on to the final step in any miniature, which is doing the base. And I wanted to do a kind of scenic base like he had just gotten out of his Zaku suit in one of the luscious green space colonies. So some grass and dirt and stuff, I guess, essentially. Nothing fancy. But of course, this miniature is smaller than your average wargaming scenic tuft, so my basing options were somewhat limited, and for that reason, I decided to use some sterling mud. And by some, I mean some very strategically placed individual grains of sterling mud. Once the sterling mud had fully dried, I painted it like a little scenic path scene with some grassy greens and muddy browns, and he even managed to squeeze in a few appropriately scaled rocks, which I think is really cute. I love that I managed to do that on the base. And with the base all polished off, this meant that I had officially completed the smallest miniature I have ever painted. So let's crack out the macro lens and take a look at how well I actually did. And here he is, the world's tiniest Char is complete. And honestly, I don't think I'm too mad at it at all. I think that if I had another crack at the face, it would be a lot better and a lot cleaner. But apart from that, and given that he is the smallest miniature I've ever painted and the details were unseeable with the naked eye, I believe that I have done very well here. But since I am chronically online and have no self-confidence of my own, it was time for me to post my tiny little guy on the internet to see if I had impressed this brand new Gundam community that I was trying to fit in with. Do they like my tiny Char? Yes, they do. So that is a solid win for me, unless they just like seeing Char, which is a strong possibility. Just like my little epic scale Warhammer project, I would love to collect more of these little guys to paint them up to the same quality and maybe find a way to incorporate them into my GBWC entry for this year as a little bit of a flex. So I guess I'm just gonna have to spend some more money on some extremely nice new Gundam kits. Oh well. But I'm afraid that is all we have time for today. As usual, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for being rogues. I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Bye 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 bye.